Welcome to the build video series. Now this is a little bit of a freebie because the whole Patreon thing, the way it works, it doesn't build until the first of the month, but I'm too excited to hold until then, so this is the very first video you get about why is the four rotor even a thing. Sure, you can have a crazy amazing build, but there's a lot of reason behind the madness, and it starts with the car behind me. So first of all, thank you guys so much for making this possible. The way YouTube works, these sort of videos would generally not even pay for an hour of Jarrett's time, which unfortunately, you know, the way the world works, he needs to eat too. He's a big boy and he needs food. But let's talk about why. What reason would I go and do a build like this? There are a lot of influences. I really do want to talk about what has caused the build to happen, because that will tell you why I've made certain decisions along the process. For example, you can go and build one of these type of cars in Forza. I've never played Forza, so I didn't even know you could make an all-wheel drive car in there. So there's a deep-seated reason as to what this build has emotional meaning behind it, and like I said, this car is the reason why. As you see this, you'll see some edits, but they're more so edits just to cut time out between certain sentences. Other than that, these type of videos are going to be more wordy, but they're also going to have more of a story to them. So this might be something you want to watch passively in the background, or if you're genuinely interested in all the things going on, go ahead and give the whole video a watch. Skip through, you're going to see me for the most part, but we're going to be adding a lot of content in between to share with you the media, the reasons and pictures of what I'm talking about. So we'll help, hang on while I get into that sort of process. So why the four rotor? Yes, of course, it's an extreme build. It's a massive car. It's a crazy idea, but it's not something where it's just more is better. And it all comes to this car. Let me show you this very first thing. So Jarrett, follow me here. This is the biggest reason why I would go any further with horsepower. This car is insane, way more horsepower than you need, but to put that to the ground, you need this. You see that sidewall flexing? That's not abnormal if you're a guy that knows what these bias ply tires are, but that is terrifying to drive on the street. Yes, it even has the name street on here, but this is a bias ply tire, meaning that there is no metal banding inside of here for rigidity. Why? Well, you see those videos of those drag cars that wrinkle the tire and absorb a lot of the shock of the launch. This is the wrong direction that I wanted to take this car in. I do not want to have so much power that I need gummy tires to put it to the ground. So you can already start to see my emotion about, okay, this is a rubber banding nasty car, but isn't there a better way to put the power to the ground? Both the Diablo and the three rotor were bought in the same year, 2011. Of course, you can see without much further, you could skip a lot of this video if you don't want to know the details of the car, but come on guys, that's the whole reason you're here. You want to know the actual specific decision-making process for a $500,000, $1 million car. This and the Diablo were both bought at the same time. If those two cars had sex, you would start to see the four rotor forming up. It's what's been in my head. You've got the reliability and elegance of the Diablo. It really is a reliable car versus the naughty by nature version of the three rotor. Problem is, a couple of issues happen here. A RX-7, an RX-7, is a very narrow and small wheel-based vehicle. Not like a Miata. If you see people trying to drift Miatas, that's a very impressive thing. Those are way too small for drifting, in my opinion. But this is still a very small car. Why? High speed is very terrifying for a narrow wheel-based car. A small bump can be hit on all tires, unsettling all of the suspension. So that brings me to the next big issue. When you widen an RX-7, especially the Rocket Bunny, which you see on my car, but we'll talk about that further, but when you widen it even by an inch here on each side, what do you have to do? You have to widen the tire, or add tire, or push the tire out towards the edges of the car. That creates a thing called bump steer. Bump steer is a very terrifying thing to feel when you're not ready for it. It's the concept of the tire is not centered on the axle, basically on the axis of turning, and so more of the tires on the outside. When you hit a rock or something on that side, it's force. It's like a pendulum element of force, distance and a force gives you a rotational, whatever. You guys that have done physics, I did physics years ago, I don't remember the exact terms, but the idea is that it causes more force in your steering wheel. So you'll feel a jerk on your steering wheel when you hit bumps or when you go into like those crevices where semi-trucks have flattened the road, not a stable thing. So top speed on an RX-7, already narrowed in short wheelbase, but then if you try and make it wider, you're band-aiding, not solving the problem. So if you have one reason why the four-rotor is even a thing, the way it's been built, it's because of this, the stock FD transmission. I have destroyed several of these in the last 2 weeks. I would say 2 or 3 of them already, just gone. Snapped output shafts and so on. The fact is, this was meant to put 215 horsepower to the ground. Yes, the car is advertised as 255 at the crank, but if you're looking at an engine dyno, or excuse me, a wheel dyno, 215 horsepower. I am cranking 840 horsepower through this to the ground. So it's closer to 1,000 at the crank. The problem with this is, this car does well with this on the street. It's a little notchy, but it works well. It's not until you start pushing the car to its limits that this becomes a massive problem, as what I'm doing right now. There is a solution. Well, there's a couple of solutions nowadays. You got the CD009 from the 350Z. It's a nice 6-speed manual that also is capable of higher horsepower, but you've got the T56 solution, specifically the Magnum. The Magnum is more like the TR6060, which is the upgraded non-T56 version. So it's a kind of weird naming scheme. But you've got probably $9,000 from the engine back in custom drivetrain solutions just to make sure that your car can hold a little bit more power at the track. So in my mind, I was like, okay, if I'm gonna add $9,000 to this car and run one 9-second pass reliably, what does that do for me? So I was thinking, okay, that's $9,000 I could put towards building a car properly. So when you think about why I did all-wheel drive, why I did all of this, it's because of the drivetrain. So this is a stock FD transmission. Of course, it's matched with me, and the problem is back here. The output shaft has been snapped off. So that sucks. But we'll be going, and we're gonna be doing 2 full videos, one on transmissions alone, but 2 on the Hollinger transmission I have in the four-rotor. You will not believe the amount of technology that goes into just a transmission. But here's the overview. The problem with this transmission in 2 ways. One is obviously the output shaft snaps, but 2 is third gear, which should be here. Third gear separates, this whole case actually flexes open when you have so much power. It's twisting and it's not meant to put that much power down. This gear separates from the gear on the bottom, which then leaves the teeth, instead of being deep-seated, they're touching the tips, and nobody ever wants to gingerly touch tips. It shears the tips off, the case starts to settle, and then it just continues shearing the whole gear off. That's what just happened on my last transmission. So you have a third gear flexing problem, as well as output shaft snapping like crazy. This transmission has met its limits. So this is probably the straw that broke the camel's back. As all of you know, all the glitz and glamour of having fun and crazy videos aside, I genuinely love turbocharging a car. This thing is the power, I mean, you think about it, the power output is that cool, exponential increase. You get that kick in your pants. Naturally aspirated cars just don't do it for me. The problem is this turbo is incorrectly sized, especially in today's type of turbo technology. So yes, it's capable of 1,000 horsepower at the wheels. So it's properly sized in that sense. But in the terms of street driving and quick power and more importantly, consistent expected power delivery, it's nuts. You start breaking traction as the turbocharger kicks on, which is as much fun as it is for videos, it's actually more terrifying from a control standpoint. Your goal on the rear tires is to massively lay down power in a very linear sense, so the tire is always at its limit, but that requires linear power output. So right there is $3,000. If you're gonna swap this turbo with a properly sized, correct turbo, $3,000. And so here again, I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna have to rebuy all of these parts to get what? Better power output? It's gonna be the same horsepower. Granted, the curve will be much smoother, but look at your cost per benefit ratio. It's one of those things where this car really is archaic, and I wanted to prove that I could do it better. Yeah, $9,000 for the transmission, $3,000 for the turbo, retuning the whole thing. And for what? really think about that. For what would I get? Cool, I can say that my car is more consistent, but you don't really see the dollar benefit. So first of all, this is a BorgWarner S480, which is a very stout turbo nonetheless. It's journal bearing, so it doesn't have ball bearings, which isn't necessarily a drawback, but it's not cooled by the coolant. It's oil cooled, that's it. So it gets hot, it gets really hot. But they have modern billet wheels like Garrett's GTX series that have a more efficient compressor map all across the board. So it's something where if you can get more power, more air pressure and flow with cooler temps, that's free energy as far as I'm concerned. Proof that this video is very linear and one takes on everything. So the thing here is that all of this is great. There's a great motivation to build such a car, but it comes down to the more of the gossipy aspects of it all. So this is an honest, truthful thing. I'm gonna mention some names, and I don't care if they know because, well, I'm here and I have a 4-rotor. It's not running, but we're here now. So this sort of motivation doesn't always come from objective situations like, yes, I want a nice car. It also comes from subjective situations. People kind of piss you off. So it was when I bought this car, and mind you, the people that made fun of me had truth behind their words, which is what hurt more. I bought this car, not the way you see it now, but back in 2011. I made it famous. The car made me famous, technically. I didn't build it. And so when anybody who was related to the guy that owned it, Tommy, would say, oh, well, yeah, you can just buy a car and then just, you don't have any talent, no talent ass clown. That really upset me because, yeah, I did just buy it. They were right, but I'm not, all the jokes I do online and showing all my failures, that's awesome. But you can see this one, I rebuilt the whole car. So it's one of those things where I was like, well, fuck you guys. Like, here I am busting my ass, and I'm just looked at as a person who has money, which, as you guys have probably all know by this point, I'm not ultra wealthy. I'm wealthy in the sense of I have everything I want, but I'm not this guy that just throws money and buys Lambos and stuff. I own a Lamborghini, I financed it as much as I could. So the impression it gave people really upset me. So I was like, okay, well, yeah, so I spend that 10 grand on the 10 grand on a drivetrain, 3 grand on a turbo. Nobody's gonna give a shit. That's not gonna get me that notoriety or improve to these guys that I'm capable of engineering something. So it was that motivation where I was like, you know what? I need to build something better. This is not what I would build. This is genuinely, this car is suicidal. This is not a vehicle you would expect me to build. Yes, I'm known for the car, but it is not the type of car I personally would build. So it was with that I started saying, well, looked at the failures of this vehicle, the problems with this car, and saw that adding more power is not going to solve my problems. Just gonna roast the tires quicker and grind them to the ground faster. Wow, that's awesome, that's amazing. And quite frankly, if you look at, there's the turbo 4-rotor that's been built, the black one, David's. Now, Dave and I have had our asides, but the fact is, look at his car. And I'm being very objective. I love the car, it's an impressive car, but it's not capable of putting more power to the ground than this one. It has no benefit to having a bigger engine than this one. And quite frankly, this one makes more horsepower as of current. Hopefully he gets it up to the 1,000, but why put all that money, in my point of view, for me, not for him. For him, it's done wonders. But for me, why build an identical car? Mind you, David's car was not built before the 4-rotor became a thing. In fact, he had told me long after I'd already started mine, so it's not that his was an influence at all. It's just a good example as of right now. The influence came from my good buddy, Ernie Taylor. Ernie, you bastard, I looked up to you. You were a huge driving force. You were my idol. This is a guy with a yellow CYM FD that was pushing limits, breaking into 9s with a 2-rotor. It was very impressive. I met him at not 7 stock, I met him at Deals Gap Rotary Rally, DGRR, and we hit it off, nice guy, until I bought Tommy's car. He then started roasting me, and I don't know why. He was taking it out on me. I get it, it's easy to make fun of me. It really is, and I embrace that. That's, quite frankly, when people make fun of me online, it makes me money, so hey, more power to them. But it was very upsetting to me that here's this guy that I looked up to, and still, hold in high regards, speaking very poorly about me. And sadly, to me, his comments didn't really hold as much weight as some of Tommy's friends originally, because Tommy's friends had good points. But this was something where I was just like, you know what? You're digging at me. I'm gonna turn this negative energy of having an idol talk shit about you into something productive. So literally, he talked shit on my Facebook page one day. It was December 15th, December 14th. It was when I started selling the Dahm shirts. And the next day, I put the order in for the drive shaft, or the eccentric shaft from New Zealand. So it was a combination of him doing that, me meeting Abel, and going to 7-stock, seeing those naturally aspirated 4-rotors running around the track. That was just, I wanted to be a big boy. I wanted to do it myself. And so that combination was literally what made me pull the trigger and purchase the core of the 4-rotor. So the final piece of the puzzle, one of the biggest influences to this whole build, was the Unicorn. Many of you know that it shares the same exact suspension geometry as my car, or mine shares it with it, but it came out in 2014. And what was important about that is I was planning to go all-wheel drive before the Unicorn came out. They, of course, actually built the car, and they were building it long before I even had the thought, but it was a couple months where I was like, man, I'm not gonna be able to put that much horsepower down on the street with only rear-wheel drive. Let's make an all-wheel drive car. I don't know how to do this. And we had 3 major solutions, and none of them were panning out. So I was gonna go back to rear-wheel drive and figure that out. Unicorn got unveiled, and the rest on that piece is history. But let me tell you guys what sort of videos that you're gonna expect from the full-blown build video process. This is kind of a teaser. It really isn't a teaser, it's a delivery, but it's kind of like an intro. But for example, I've got an entire video. What would you say, Jarrett? Maybe 20 minutes? 10 minutes of the Hollinger video? Like full, yeah. We have a video from the guys from Hollinger describing what each piece of that transmission does. It is a very in-depth piece because that transmission's $25,000. That is, you know, you guys better get a killer video out of it, and I sure as hell better get a killer transmission. So we're gonna be doing videos very specific on different aspects of the car. So the Hollinger transmission will probably be the next video. You know, as of the first, you know, once the whole thing starts kicking on, we'll do the Hollinger transmission video. We're gonna do a whole video on the chassis. And then what we're gonna try and do, we're gonna time this in a way that the engine itself, there's so many aspects of that engine that are custom to my car. Some of them are Abel's trade secrets, but for the most part, we'll be able to show you almost everything that's going on. But we'll do a whole video just on the 4-rotor and its design flaws and solutions there. So the videos are gonna be very in-depth, just like you saw with the FD transmission. We're gonna be going into full detail about one thing at a time. So if you're not into Hollinger transmission, which I suspect almost all of you will be, but if you're not, there'll be a chassis video. There's gonna be a body and design, all the design help we had from some guys locally that worked for Ford on the Ford GT and so on. There's a lot of content about different aspects of the car. So join me on this whole build video series. I cannot thank you guys enough. Obviously this is not scripted. This is genuinely very easy for me to say because without you guys this wouldn't have been possible. So I truly, when the Patreon thing came alive, I was expecting honestly just like $1,000. Like that would have made me happy, but you guys really made this possible. And as a result, the 4-rotor's fully back on track. So if you want to say, hey, I helped, you guys really did. And some people roast me online about that, like, oh, you had the community help you? Clearly the community wanted to help, and this is a build that isn't meant for just me. It's meant for everybody. You know, yeah, it's my car at the end of the day, but think of it this way. There's no reason for that car. I can't turn around and sell it for the amount I put into it. It's meant for everybody's entertainment. So with that, thank you.